No, I just got a new one. I just got a freaking new one. Maybe one that's... And is it because of the people online you're listening to? Or?
No, the people here were just talking to people.
Yeah.
They weren't, it wasn't part of the service to them. They just
Got it.
So we went
To stop.
stop. But the people at home are hearing too. They can hear just chatting.
Can I give you an envelope? Can you join?
I'm waiting at that.
Okay. During the reading? It's totally fine for you to say no.
No, I have to because of the way it's set.
Yeah. Can I give you one? Can I give you four? I painted them. Good. Thank you. Oh, no, they're actually getting out. Oh, great.
Well, we can start.
Good morning, everybody. So as always, we're making changes and we're evolving, and so we just want to keep you on your toes because you know how it is. So when the music starts, that's the start of the service. It's not in gathering. So, you know, the chatter can get picked up, and then they're all hearing it on YouTube. So just, wanted to let you know. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome to the Keene Unitarian Universalist Church, which has been serving the community and preserving liberal religion in Keene since its founding in 1824. We welcome UUs, humanists, free thinkers, tree huggers, and law-abiding contrarians, as well as whatever spiritual path you're currently traveling. And I was just kind of looking at this banner here, noting all the different spiritual traditions that are here, and thinking how fortunate I feel to be part of a community that welcomes in the wisdom from all of those traditions, including the wisdom of each of our own individual paths. And that's what makes this place different. And that's one of the things I love about it. We hope that KUUC is where your search ends and your journey begins. My name is Richard Clark, and I discovered KUUC and have been coming here for about 2 years with my family. Some ways that I have given to the community are in doing welcomings like this, chalice lightings, being a part of the RE program, and working on the worship committee for a time, and working now on the transition team. So a number of different ways. But my sense of belonging and spiritual growth have also given back to me. If you're here for the first time and are seeking the society of other inclusive, open-minded, justice-seeking people, please sign our guest book at the front of the sanctuary. And we hope that you'll join us for coffee hour after the service through the doors to my right. Each week, we designate an ambassador to help welcome new folks and answer any questions you may have. And this week, our ambassador is Carol White, who's right here. If you've been around for a while, we're happy to see you again too. Please come back with a friend who may be interested in renewing their spirit, joining our happy company, and of course, doing some committee work. We always welcome children in our sanctuary. Their noises to us are holy music. Before we begin, please silence your phones and settle into this hour of community, creativity, and challenge.
Our opening words come to us from adaptation from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and from a colleague, Beth Monholland. We gather on this cold January day, seeking the warmth of community, trusting in our shared community, our shared commitments to promote justice and to seek peace. We come with hearts filled with joy and weighed with worry for all that we are facing in the coming days. And we gather to remember that we are not alone. We join a cloud of witnesses, a legion of ancestors who remind us that countless before us have faced perilous times. We gather to remember, in the words of Dr. King, that human progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability. It comes through tireless efforts of those of us who know that the time is always ripe to do right. Though we may be tired and weary and worried, may this time together renew our spirits and call us ever forward to liberation and to love. I invite Cherry Buskey forward to light our chalice. And the rest of you can look in your order of service for our chalice lighting words. We kindle this flame to remind ourselves of the light of truth the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. And now I invite you to rise in body and or in spirit to join in singing hymn 169 in the Gray Hymn Book, We Shall Overcome.
Good morning again.
Good morning.
So today's Time for All Ages is a mashup of poems about Martin Luther King. So Sherry and I will kind of do a back and forth here. Beneath the sky, so vast and wide, a voice rang out, a nation's guide. With courage bold, a vision clear, Dr. King spoke words we still hold dear. I have a dream, his anthem soared, a dream of peace, of hate ignored, where children walk hand in hand, united hearts across the land.
His dream, a beacon shining bright, still calls us forth to join the fight, to banish hate, to heal, to mend, to build a peace that knows no end. I dream of valleys filled with song, where justice flows unyielding, strong. From mountain heights, let freedom ring, and join the hope that all may bring.
In every heart where courage grows, in every voice that justice knows, his legacy, like morning's beam, reminds us all to dare to dream. One life lived for others' gain turned the tide of fear and pain. His dreams live on, unbound, untamed. In every heart, his courage claimed.
Not by wealth nor fleeting fame, but by the strength to face the flame. Dr. King, your truth still stands. Peace is built by loving hands.
And with that, the children will go upstairs and we will be making a peace banner today.
In a moment, we will be accepting the offering for the works of this congregation. Please give generously as you are moved and able.
Will
That was beautiful. Thank you. Please join me in the words of dedication for our offering found in your order of service. We dedicate these gifts in service of our mission to actively create compassionate community and work for a fair and peaceful world. I would be remiss if I started our prayer without addressing the situation in Gaza. And in this moment, I want to start our prayer with gratitude for the ceasefire and with the hope that that too will be the start of more fairness and more peace in that part of the world that's experienced so much violence. The rest of our prayer comes to us from a book called Black Liturgies, written by a Black queer woman named Cole Arthur Riley. God of solidarity, thank you for being a God who enters the suffering of the world, who doesn't run from those in pain, but rushes to the sight of blood and tears. Release us from those empty cravings for unity that come at no cost to the oppressor. Lead us toward spaces of costly advocacy. We confess that in speaking up on behalf of the oppressed, we too soon become enamored with the sound of our own voices. Our egos spoil even our best intentions. Show us when the voices of the vulnerable are being drowned out by the cacophony of the privileged. Make our presence and dignity known in a world that perpetually eclipses the voices of the marginalized. Guide us into a solidarity that demands something of us. Let us learn to risk ourselves on behalf of the vulnerable, believing that when one of us is harmed, we all are. And God, keep us from those who will demonize the fight in us, who would prefer us complacent and far from one another. Secure in us the courage to resist, knowing that together we will restore what the world has tried to suffocate in us. Amen. Now for a moment of silence. Thank you. Our sung response will be hymn 107, found in the Teal hymn book, There's a River Flowing in My Soul. So now is a creative moment of reading. And if I gave you an envelope, now is your time to come forward. There are 14 envelopes out there, and each of you will read in numerical order. So anyone with an envelope, please come forward, all 14 of you, all at once. And what you're going to hear are 14 different quotes of information that I learned on my transitional ministry trip to Montgomery back in October. So they're in loosely historical order. So Deb McClay, I hope you have number 1.
I do.
Great. And number 14 should go at the end of the line furthest away from this microphone. This is a little bit of an exercise in and of itself. Maybe I should have done it by birth date or something. When you joined. All right, go ahead.
Okay. 6.5 million people came to the Americas between 1492 and 1776. 1 million came from Europe, most by choice, seeking a better life or freedom from oppression. 5.5 million came from Africa, most in chains. Howard Dodson.
In 1641, Massachusetts, including present-day New Hampshire and Maine, became the first colony to formally legalize slavery. This continued into 1807 with at least 336 trafficking voyages landing in New England ports, entrapping 40,000 plus Africans auctioned into slavery. These are some of the places advocating for freedom and liberty. Example, the American Revolution.
More than half of all enslaved black peoples were forever separated from their families and loved ones by auctions and human trafficking during the domestic slave trade. From the EJI Museum.
During Reconstruction, the Supreme Court blocked congressional efforts to protect formerly enslaved people. In case after case, the court ceded control to the same white Southerners who used terror and violence to stop black political participation, upheld laws and practices codifying racial hierarchy, and embraced a new constitutional order defined by states' rights.
At the same time slavery ended, the U.S. was giving land away in the West and Midwest to European immigrants.
Racial terror lynchings were directly tied to the history of enslavement and the reestablishment of white supremacy after the Civil War. These lynchings were distinct from hangings and mob violence committed against white people and other groups because they were intended to terrorize Black Americans and enforce racial hierarchy. Peace and Justice Lynching Memorial.
Only 1% of lynchings committed after 1900 led to a criminal conviction. Peace and Justice Lynching Memorial.
At Magnolia Plantation in South Carolina, former quarters were occupied by descendants of enslaved peoples until 1990.
In the 1980s and 1990s war on drugs, there was a mandatory minimum sentence. Half of those in federal prison are incarcerated for a drug offense, and 2/3 of those in prison for drug offenses nationwide are people of color. President Richard Nixon's domestic policy chief, John Ehrlichman, later explained that the war on drugs was fueled by a desire to criminalize Black people.
Today, more than 10,000 children are housed in adult prisons or jails, and some 3,000 children are serving life or life without parole sentences.
64% of adults in the U.S. have had an immediate or extended family member in jail or prison.
Black children are 6 times more likely to be shot by death by police than white children.
It's all right to tell a man to lift himself by his own bootstraps, but it is cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Our final reading from Brian Stevenson. I don't think slavery ended in 1865. It just evolved.
So what the civil rights movement has to do with us, or with UUs, Unitarians, Universalists, and Unitarian Universalists have been on all sides of history. Our people have been both slaveholders as well as abolitionists. We have been civil rights activists, purveyors of the status quo, and worse. And we are not monolithic. Our ancestors were not monolithic. We come from good and bad and everything in between, complicated and complex. And when I think about Unitarian Universalism and the civil rights movement, the first people I tend to think of are the UUs who lost their lives during that time period, such as Viola Liuzzo, a UU housewife from Michigan who traveled down to Alabama in support of voters' rights, and the UU minister, the Reverend James Reeb, who participated in the March on Selma before being beaten to death. But they are not my focus today. I wanted to lift up why I think it's critical for UUs to care about racism in this country, especially in all or mostly white congregations. And I wanted to draw on 2 stories of strength in the face of oppression that I hope will help us imagine what might be possible as we try and find places where we can make a difference in our community and in the world. And I hope that they will help provide some strength in the week and the weeks to come. It is crucial to understand the way that racism has deeply perpetuated injustice and shaped this country in an ongoing way throughout the history. That was my hope in that reading, with all of those different facts and pieces of info. And I wish I could convey it in a thorough way today, but it's simply too big of a topic to do in one moment, and too much for anyone to hold, frankly. I especially hold this wish when we are looking both at Martin Luther King Jr. Day tomorrow, the honoring of his birthday, and the inauguration of our next and former president of this country, who is one that has been thriving on stoking fear and who threatens democracy. As I mentioned, I've been taking this seminar on transitional ministry and learning about the ways that I can encourage and support you during this time of transition between your previously called minister and the one that comes next. As part of our denomination's commitment to anti-racism and anti-oppression, that thread has been woven throughout this training, and that was part of why we visited the civil rights sites and memorials and museums during our training in October. And as an aside, if anyone else is inspired to do a civil rights journey throughout the South, there's a phenomenal organization that was founded and is run by Unitarian Universalists called the Living Legacy Project. And they have trips planned this coming fall and plan them in an ongoing way. Sometimes even congregations go together. The first story I want to tell you about is about the Montgomery bus boycott. When most of us think about the Montgomery bus boycott, most of us think about Rosa Parks or the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And when I was at the Rosa Parks Museum, I picked up a book called Pies from Nowhere, which I, of course, forgot in my office, so I can show you later if you want to see the cover or read the rest of the book. But in that book, I learned about a lesser-known hero of the Montgomery bus boycott named Georgia Gilmore. Has anyone heard of her before? I had never heard of her before. It doesn't look like any of you have either, unless everyone at home is secretly raising their hand. Georgia Gilmore was a cook at the National Lunch Company in Montgomery, Alabama. And on December 1st, 1955, Georgia was working at the restaurant when a news alert came on over the radio. A black woman named Rosa Parks had been arrested for refusing to give up her seat on the bus to a white passenger, as the law demanded. Already a civil rights activist, Rosa was tired of giving in to rules that were unjust, and she was not the only one. The next day, an association of black women distributed a flyer asking people to boycott public transportation on Monday. It said, "Please stay off all of the buses." And when the bus boycotts broke out in Montgomery after Rosa Parks was arrested, Georgia knew just what to do. She herself had stopped riding the bus 2 months prior. On that occasion, she had boarded the bus, she'd paid her fare, and then the bus driver had insisted that she get off and get on at the back door. But after she stepped off, the bus sped off and left her behind, furious. So she had already stopped riding the buses. So when she heard this announcement, Georgia organized a group of women who cooked and baked to fundraise for gas and cars to help sustain the boycott. Called the Club from Nowhere, Georgia was the only person who knew who did the baking and who did the buying of the food. And when people asked her where the money came from, she said the money came from nowhere. When Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested for his role in the boycott, Georgia herself testified on his behalf. Georgia lost her job as a result of her testimony, so she started cooking and serving people right in her own home, and that became a meeting place for civil rights leaders. The Montgomery bus boycott lasted 382 days. 382 days of walking instead of taking the bus or hitching a ride or offering other people rides. And Georgia's efforts raised enough money to actually buy more cars for their effort to avoid the buses. Through every season of the year, people committed and they recommitted to their actions, not knowing what would happen, not knowing how it would end. The Montgomery bus protest showed that a community can unite for a common purpose and fight injustice without using violence. Ordinary people relied on their faith, their courage, and their hard work to improve conditions for themselves and for the future generations. The people who were participating in the bus boycotts experienced a sense of belonging in participating together. There were church services twice a week. People organized locations for rides. Taxi drivers didn't charge people if they couldn't pay, and those who were able to pay, did so. Ironically, the rejection of the protesters' modest requests, the protesters were not asking for complete desegregation, but the rejection of those in power to their modest requests eventually brought about a court case which led to their victory. They got more than what they were asking for. For generations, people have been experiencing harm on various forms of transportation, whether they are like Rosa and saying no, or they're being harmed in the ways that Georgia was not allowed to actually take the bus ride that she'd paid for, and of course other things too. And it's interesting when I think about today and this moment of thinking about, I don't know if anybody's heard of the hashtag driving while black, and thinking about the real fear that many black people experience when being pulled over. There's a long connection between transportation and racism. People like Georgia Gilmore may not play roles in the spotlight, but the food she coordinated and prepared, as well as the money she raised, made a significant difference in the Montgomery bus boycott, which was the movement that ultimately led to the desegregation of local buses. Nearly 20 years ago, I heard a woman named Annie Leonard speak. She was the creator of a groundbreaking animated documentary called The Story of Stuff. She said at that time that there are so many justice issues out there, we don't even have to pick something boring. Georgia Gilmore used her skills in the kitchen to support a cause that she cared about. I would argue that all of us have skills and gifts, and that we don't have to pick a boring way to engage in issues we care about. I wonder what your skills and your gifts are, and how you are already using them, and where you might have capacity to contribute to something or some things that you really care about. Taking action is one of the best antidotes to despair. Some of the leaders of this congregation, both from the board and from the transition team, will be leading an effort on February 2nd after the service to help people map out their skills and abilities, to think about how we might align our own gifts with both the needs of this congregation in living out its mission and also with the larger community. The following month, in March, you will also have an opportunity to participate in a listening session with the Monadnock Interfaith Project to help decide on what the specific issues are in this community that we care enough about to want to work together with other faith communities in our area to create change in our world. I hope you can come to both of those events. We can all contribute from what we have to offer, and it can not only be enough, but it can be really meaningful. The second story I bring to you today is from my experience at the Freedom Riders Museum. Have any of you heard of the Freedom Riders movement from the Civil Rights Movement? I'm seeing a lot more hands than Georgia Gilmore. In brief, for anyone who needs a refresher, the Freedom Riders were civil rights activists who rode interstate buses in the segregated South in 1961. Their hope was to challenge the non-enforcement of U.S. Supreme Court decisions that ruled that segregated buses across interstate lines were unconstitutional. I had the opportunity to visit this Freedom Riders Museum in Montgomery in their old Greyhound bus station. The original plan, was for 13 volunteers of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, to leave Washington, D.C. on May 4th, 1961, and they were going to ride buses and arrive in New Orleans, Louisiana on May 17th, Mother's Day. The NAACP didn't want, which was also founded by Unitarians, didn't want the Freedom Riders to do their action because they were in the process of pursuing legal action, and they thought the Freedom Rides would be a costly distraction. The Freedom Riders made it through Virginia, North and South Carolina, and in Georgia, but when they hit Alabama, they encountered some intense violence from segregationists and from the Ku Klux Klan. One of the buses was bombed, so they were unable to complete the trip. Others were inspired and picked up where they left off, finishing the trip to New Orleans. People also joined from all over the country, joined efforts, planning and carrying out other trips across the South throughout the summer, increasing the total number of Freedom Riders from the original 13 to 436. And while many people were injured in this effort, not a single one died, which is actually, unfortunately, incredible. They ended up playing an important role in the civil rights movement. The pressure from the Freedom Riders on the government and the Justice Department's pressure then on the Interstate Commerce Commission led to them declaring an end to racial segregation in all waiting rooms and lunch counters of these bus stations, effective from November 1st, 1961. It also sent a clear message to Southern whites that desegregation of other institutions was likely to happen soon. It's an example of an action that was taken in the name of justice, where it was not clear, once again, whether or not it would succeed. And some people who also cared about racial justice didn't agree with the strategy. They weren't all on the same page. Sometimes it's helpful to engage in multiple strategies simultaneously. Sometimes we teach our kids our values, and then we just have to let them live them. Sometimes only a few people in a congregation are involved in a congregation's social justice work. Small groups of people can accomplish great things on behalf of institutions and sometimes in spite of institutions. We don't always need everyone on board with every action to push for change and to be effective. The initial Freedom Rides also highlights for me the power of the pivot. After the bombing and mob attacks in Anniston and Birmingham, Alabama, they needed to strategize, they needed to regroup, they needed to decide on other actions to take. A new group of volunteers from Nashville came to Birmingham to pick up the ride, and while that group didn't make it all the way to Louisiana, they were arrested, jailed, and taken back to the Tennessee border when Bull Connor decided he couldn't stand their singing freedom songs in the jail cells. Joy is powerful. More volunteers also came to Montgomery, and they continued the efforts. When the going gets tough, where can you bring in help? Lastly, though the Freedom Riders inspired many other non-violent direct actions in the civil rights movement, some of the Freedom Riders themselves went on to do very ordinary things, like owning 2 McDonald's and 4 hotels. Ordinary people can do amazing things. Amazing people can also be ordinary. So what? Tomorrow is both the observance of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday and the second inauguration of our President Trump. And I'm sure the irony is not lost on people. One man had a dream that his 4 little children would one day live in a nation where they would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by their character. And the other man opposes efforts for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dr. King pushed for the civil rights legislation, which included the Immigration and Nationality Services Act of 1965, opening entry to the U.S. to immigrants from Mexico and from other non-European countries. In contrast, Mr. Trump is currently preparing to deport the largest number of immigrants in history without permanent documentation, including more than 1 million people who have temporary protected status and hundreds of thousands of people who are fleeing humanitarian crises in countries like Afghanistan, Ukraine, Nicaragua, and Haiti. As writer and 3rd-generation Japanese-American Timothy Soseki Kudo put in an article about his family's incarceration in the Japanese internment camps, we know that injustices like this can be resisted, and now we must. To confront the Trump government without compromise, we must raise what Martin Luther King Jr. called a coalition of conscience. Religious communities such as this one are well poised for people to explore their consciences and to amplify the power of their actions by taking action together. The people of KUUC are actively committed to creating compassionate community and working for a fair and peaceful world. You are the people of KUUC. You have the power to commit to this again and again, and to examine what this means to you. Unitarian Universalists do not commit to a particular creed. We believe, and we also cannot believe whatever we want, but rather each of us must examine our own hearts and minds. We believe what we must, what we view as the ultimate truth or right, our own sense of truth, our individual consciences. We continue to integrate new ideas and information as we come across them and use them to guide our own internal moral compasses. At the beginning, I mentioned that our Unitarian Universalist and Unitarian Universalist ancestors have not all shared the same values as one another. That's also true for our genetic ancestors, each of us. We can choose to lift up the ancestors that inspire us. We can choose people related to us and the ones we share identities with, religious ancestors, cultural ancestors, ones with whom we share a nationality. I am inspired by the Georgia Gilmores of the world. Much of her work was behind the scenes and unacknowledged for a long time, even though she made real sacrifices and took very real risks. From her, I know that there is not only one way to work for justice. I also draw courage from my maternal grandmother, who visited and lived in more than 30 different countries by the time she was 18. Her parents worked internationally, so she needed to find the strength within her to start over again and again, to meet new people, to learn new languages, to navigate different cultures. We walk, we roll, we scoot in the path of those who have gone before us, and we can choose which paths to follow. May it be so. Please rise in body or in spirit and join me in singing hymn 168, One More Step. We will extinguish our chalice with the chalice extinguishing words that are printed in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with the world until we are together again. Endpoint by Jared Anderson. One day, your story will end, and all of the choices you made will be frozen like an insect in the amber of history. Friend, this isn't meant to be grim. just a reminder that you are building something that will one day be whole and complete. So build with purpose.
How do you say to a child in the night, nothing's all black, but then nothing's all white? How do you say it will all be alright when you know that it might not be true? What do you do? Careful the things you say, children will listen. Careful the things you do, children will see and love. Children may not obey, but children will listen. Children will look to you for which way to turn, to learn what to be. Careful before you say, listen to me. Children will listen. Careful the wish you make. Wishes are children. Careful the path you take. Wishes come true. For free. Careful the spell you cast, not just on children. Sometimes the spell may last long past what you see and turn against you. Careful the tale you tell, that is the spell. Children will listen. Guide them a step away. Children will glisten. Temper with what is true. Children will turn. It's just to be free. Careful before you say, listen to me. Children will listen. Children will listen. Children will listen.